My name is Ryan Molloy. I'm a faculty member at Eastern Michigan University teaching graphic design. Today I'll be discussing what I call the machine hand, or rethinking the single line font. My interest in single line fonts started around 2012 when I first received a Silhouette craft cutter. As the maker movement had started to blossom, so too did consumer tools for crafters. Craft cutters, which double as plotters and rotary cutters, DIY desktop CNC machines, and drawbots quickly became popular. For me, my interest always lied in the question of how can I use this consumer machine in ways that it wasn't fully intended. The earliest versions of the Silhouette did not include pen plotter attachments, but they were easily hacked to hold a pen. As I began working with the machine, I kept looking for ways to experiment and develop my own single line fonts in new ways, such as this modular typeface. The single line font has a long history dating back decades as tools largely used in mechanical drafting. This took the form of lettering guides, both stencils and pantograph-based ones like the Stanoscript. The first CNC-based machine was the Rottering Inscriber. Digital versions of single-line fonts were largely proprietary, belonging specifically to CAD software. Most font-making software today cannot be utilized to make single-line fonts. There are a number of hacks designers can use to make single-line fonts, and with SVG fonts now more commonplace, it's easier to produce one. Overall, there is a large demand for single-line fonts within the maker community. As crafting is a large part of the broader maker community, there have been a growing number of handwritten fonts developed for crafters and CNC drawing devices. There are even services now available that will convert your own handwriting into a single-line font. Despite a large presence in the craft community, calligraphic writing, such as brush calligraphy, copperplate, and pointed pen, are in general, any writing that uses pressure to produce differences of weight is largely absent from computer-controlled devices. The presence of the hand in most CNC pen applications has to be simulated in a variety of ways. Open outline type, doubling or vertical offsetting of paths to achieve differences of weight, or simply filling in the path. Uh, Part of the rationale in most production of using a single line font lies its inefficiency, which many of these techniques lie counter to. So in my work, I began to seek out ways to bring back the hand into single line typography. My first attempts at doing this were done largely using brush pens, which over a period of time I developed a set of tools or apparatus that simply by their weight would create inconsistencies with the writing. The modulation of weight was mostly randomized. It was created only by the machine struggling with the pen apparatus. Continuing work on single line typefaces, I began looking at other sources for inspiration. Growing up in El Paso, Texas, I always had a fascination with Pachuco hand styles. I like these forms partly because they were frequently done with ballpoint pen, they were unicase, and their very nature was a single line typeface. Oftentimes, added embellished typefaces or other kinds of forms also appeared on um, the printed page. So I set out to kind of create my own version of a hand style based typeface with the goal that the pen would determine the weight in contrast to the characters, like this example using a calligraphy pen. These experiments also extended into using the brushes inside of Adobe Illustrator. For me, the idea of the single line typeface wasn't solely limited to production on a router or on a pen plotter, but it could also be used to extend to digital tools. If I could use a brush in the physical world, why can't I use a brush in the digital world? For me, this move led to two tracks in sort of further exploring the application of single line fonts for the creation of type. The first was that it made me think I could potentially find other ways to replicate the human hand, specifically the z-axis, up and down. Most single line fonts are rarely designed with the z-axis in mind. So, looking towards history, I began to look for inspiration as how I can develop forms that would have the elements of brush lettering. I switched from the craft cutter to the CNC. Proprietary software of most craft cutters and drawing machines was limited in its capabilities. The CNC simply allowed more control over pressure. On the left, you'll see prototypes of a Carolingian minuscule. On the right, a diagram of the various pads that make up the letter form. In order to achieve the variations of weight on letters, such as O, the letter form has to actually be drawn in multiple parts. Other tests included fonts loosely based on blackletter and other medieval typefaces. The idea of using a single line font for carving was appealing to me. On the left, you'll see a prototype of a blackletter typeface, and on the right, a simulation of a carved version. These experiments were great for myself, but I'd like to see them go beyond the knowledge that I have. So currently, I have been working on prototypes of digital tools that will allow someone else to simulate and export paths based on their tool settings. A user can input whatever tool settings they have, the cut depth, and then output the design, whereas it's now making something for others. The second direction in this research has taken me is the fabrication of wood type, or further asking the question, how can we apply the principles of single line typography to the manufacturing process? If it was intended for speed and efficiency, why can't I also use it to make gestural movements inspired by graffiti, as you see here, and kind of then create new forms with type that way? Or what can we add if we add more complexity to these methods? And then sort of combining all of that work, how do we apply pressure? How do we build complex forms? How can all of this be achieved by just dictating the path and direction of the pen plotter into making type? And so this is where these all lie, is kind of an application of all of these kinds of different ideas. Creation of single line typefaces applied to both wood type and pen plotter drawing. Thank you.